So I think what you're going to find in this discussion today and Charlie's participation in it, that if you put your cell phone by the screen, Charlie's energy is going to charge your cell phone. You don't have to plug it in. You'll just take advantage of the passion, that insight, and that energy that he's going to offer. But before we get into the crux of what we want to explore with Charlie, we want to do a quick poll because we want to see who's out there, and so we can kind of chart our communications and our discussions to the people who are participating in today's Hope Forum. So Kim, without any additional introduction, if you could launch our very quick 3-question poll. So there's 3 questions. We ask you to kind of select the one that best represents you or your thinking. Don't forget to scroll down. There's a 3rd question that doesn't show at the initial screen, but if you scroll down, you'll find the 3rd question, and then don't forget to submit. We'll give you a few seconds to do that. And that probably should be plenty of time, so thank you for participating in it. Kim, if you can close the poll and kind of share with us a sense of who's out there and other information that we've asked them to provide, that would be great.
I'm going to give it another couple seconds because I see we have 595 people, 96, 97 going up, and we still have about 150 that haven't got their poll numbers in. So let's just give it another like 10 seconds or so.
Okay, great. So don't forget to respond to these questions just to give us some additional background. We appreciate that.
Okay, we'll give it another 5 seconds. Get your answers in. There's 3 questions.
Don't forget to scroll down to find that 3rd question. Don't forget to submit.
Okay.
Okay. And you're going to show us the results, Kim, and you just muted yourself. Here we go. Okay, so how familiar are you with Kids at Hope? 53%, over half of you have attended a training, and 17% are being introduced to Kids at Hope and the work we do and the breadth of the work we do with people like Charlie and others we've had on these Hope Forums. So welcome to you newbies. We're great to have you. 62% obviously represent the educational sector. The next largest sector is juvenile justice. That's important for us to know, and child welfare and behavioral health and community-based organizations. We got 1% of you are parents, but I really believe more than 1% because although we sometimes identify ourselves just by our profession or our sector, I know many more of you are parents as well. So you're wearing 2 hats in today's forum, and 63% of you have adopted Kids at Hope in your organizations or community. So thank you for that. This gives us some robust insight as to who's out there and that's absolutely terrific. So, Charlie, you wrote this book a couple times, second edition, correct? And
3 years to do the new book.
Yeah, you came to this conclusion that there's no such thing as a bad kid. That seems to fly in the face of conventional wisdom, where we know there's many kids doing bad things. So let's go back to the early part of your history, professional history and personal history. When you were first faced with some of the most challenging kids, you're fresh out of college, you got an MSW, you're a director of treatment for a residential center, all the things that we're faced with, overwhelmed as young adults entering our new profession, and you're taking on the most difficult of challenges. Did you believe at that point in time when you were first faced with these difficulties that there was no such thing as a bad kid?
That's a great question. I'd like to believe that the answer was yes, because I think it's always been in my DNA to be a helper. In preschool, I was always the kid helping the director's kid who was handicapped. It was just always part of me to want to reach out. And when you're like that, it's almost inherent that you believe everybody can be helped. And I'm not sure that everybody feels that way, but that was kind of unique to me. Yet, when I started in residential treatment in 1977, I think I was pretty much traumatized. You know, I still believed in every kid, but I could not believe the acuity, the amount of physical restraints, the intense acting out. It was shocking. I would finish a shift at 11 o'clock at night, and I didn't go home till 2 a.m. because I was literally shaking. Because my first job in residential care was as a crisis counselor. And in 1977, at this big residential center, they would bring any acting out kid down to this room called the crisis room. And I was there to take care of them. And I didn't know what I was doing. I'd be holding down a kid, and there'd be 4 kids jumping me and urinating. It was awful. But I hung in there, I don't know how, and as days went by, I learned. I learned how to help these kids. But I don't think at any point did I think they were bad. I think they were kids doing really bad things, making really bad choices. But in my heart, I just had to believe that they were good kids who just needed someone to believe in them. And in my 42 years, I know that's true. There are no bad kids, just bad luck and bad choices.
So that takes us to kind of that theme that you talk about many times in your workshops, is whether or not these kids are choosing to be bad. So talk to us a little bit about how kids make choices and why so often they may make the bad choice.
Well, I tell people all the time, the biggest crock in the world is that kids like acting out. There could be no more stupid comment in the history of mankind. I've had elementary school teachers say, oh, he likes being sent to the office. He gets to avoid the work. Secretary's nice to him, lets him go in the candy jar. Middle and high school teachers, likes coming in rude, likes being provocative. No, they don't. Likes bullying. No, they don't. If you could put truth serum into any troubled student and say, who would you rather be? You the one who's acting out, getting in trouble every day, or that kid over there who has lots of friends, a wonderful family life, and a great future ahead of her? Who would you rather be? There's no kid in America that would pick themselves. They're doing the best with what they have. You know, the anger is a message. Behavior is always a message. It's a neon light flashing over kids saying, help me. And it could come in many different forms. It could be self-management skills. It could be changing the environment. It could be the way we deal with the kid. Because I always say, anytime you have kids acting out, your first question should always be, what am I doing? What could I change to help this kid? Because I know this kid's good. So in my book's 500 pages, and it's all about what can we be doing? Because, you know, I hate it because some people say, oh, Charlie's a behavior guy. I'm not a behavior guy. I'm no expert on behavior management. I'm really, I think, an expert on preventing behavior, on helping the people out there build such great relationships and giving kids hope and positivity that they don't want to act out anymore. You know, and so no kid likes acting out. Behavior is just a message. Help me out. I've got anger. I've got frustration. I don't know what to do. Please help me. So and we have ways to do that, and it's amazing.
So one of the research questions that our center's interested in is we ask people, do you believe you can help every child succeed without exception? Do you believe you can help every child succeed without exception? On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being strongly disbelieve in that, 10 being strongly believe, we're always not shocked or surprised, but interested as to why everyone who works with kids doesn't believe that they can help every child succeed without exception. The reason we're interested in that answer is that if you were working in cancer research and they asked you as a cancer researcher, do you believe you can find the cure for cancer? On a scale of 1 to 10, strongly disbelieve you can find a cure for cancer, 10 strongly believe you can find a cure for cancer. Would you want anyone in cancer research that doesn't believe they can find a cure for cancer, that they would be able to circle 10? And isn't it the same answer or theme that we're exploring, that if you're working with young people and you don't believe you can help every child succeed, no exceptions, then you're giving up on that young person. And most importantly, we discovered you're first giving up on yourself. You should be like the cancer researcher. You should believe that you will find a way to help every child succeed, no exception. It may have not been yesterday, it may have not been today, but it certainly could be tomorrow. And you have to believe that. That's true for the cancer research. They haven't found the cure for cancer yesterday. It may not be today, but they're not going to give up until they find the cure for cancer. So it's that passion that seemed to resonate with you, Charlie, early on, that even though you didn't have the answers, you were not ready to give up on yourself, first and foremost, nor were you ready to give up on the kid. And through that experience, you discovered strength-based strategies. So talk to us about that journey from looking at maybe punishing kids to finding their strengths and looking at a different way of helping them retool their behavior toolkit.
Well, actually, I would like to go back to the succeed question you brought on first, because I think the big problem with the question is how we define success. And I have staked my career on the fact that too many people are often held back in terms of helping kids because of how they define success. You know, there's over 500, 600 people out there. A lot of you are educators. If I said, what does it mean to be successful with a student? You'd probably say behaving well, getting his academics done, getting back on track. I'm not sure that's what success is. Say I'm working with a tough teenager and I'm using all my wonderful strength-based strategies and I'm building a relationship with the kid, yet he still blows out of school. I might have still been successful. You know, the brain doesn't fully mature till the mid-20s. And I have seen this multiple times over the last 40 years. I've worked with so many at-risk teenagers and younger kids who seem to not succeed. They end up in a detention center. They end up here, they end up here. But in their mid-20s, they come back, they find me. They find some of my staff and they thank me profusely for what we did when they were 13 years old. And they remember the relationships. They remember some of the anecdotes, some of the moments we had. And they're telling me, most importantly, that they have made it in life. They have a family, they have a job, and they wouldn't be where they are if it weren't for me and the staff who were helping them 10 years ago.
So you're right, that word success really throws most of us off when we actually begin to explore its definition. However, Charlie, I have good news for you. We've taken that challenge on at ASU and Kids at Hope. And let me give you a framework, because I think it will change our perspective of the word success and give us a better understanding of how it's actually achieved. I think what we've been lacking is a clear definition, but we've used that word over and over again like we all know what it means, and the fact is we don't. So let me give you kind of three very clear, precise explanations of how we see the word success, and I think it really creates a powerful framework to go forward. The first definition of success is a very personal one. It's whatever I decide that I want to achieve and I can achieve it, I'm successful. Nobody else gets to enter into the conversation. I'm the only one that establishes my goals. If I decide to cook lasagna for the first time, it doesn't matter if it's as good as my grandmother's. I like it, and that's important. We all too often abdicate what success is to somebody else's judgment for us. We should never give up our own personal definition of success, and we are the only judge of our success, that should give us a great deal of self-esteem. Now, we do add it shouldn't be illegal, immoral, or unethical, because we want those rules to play as well. But understanding the personal definition of success is powerful. The second definition is organizational definition or bureaucratic. It's the one we more often focus on. And that is that we're waiting for someone else to tell us what we need to do to be successful in their eyes. How many questions we need to get right on a test to be able to get an A. How many questions we need to get right on a math quiz to be able to get a B or an A, or what happens if we answer just a minimum number and get a C. But that's somebody else's definition. That's us entering into an art contest and not getting a blue ribbon because somebody judged our artwork not as good as someone else's artwork. So we have to understand that organizational definition. And the third one is, I think, the one that you're getting to as well. And that is, if we have a personal definition of success and we understand what that is, we have an organizational definition of success and we understand what that is. What is it that we all agree to that becomes successful? And we call that the cultural definition of success. And we say that's the person who becomes a contributing member of their family, of their community, and to themselves. And the quick answer to that, and our people who have been trained in Kids Hope will know those are the 4 destinations: home and family, education, career, community service, hobbies, or recreation. And the simple test, the simple litmus test to understand whether you're a success culturally, different than organizationally, different from personal, but they're all profoundly important to us as human beings, knowing where we fit in, personal, organizational, or cultural, is to be able to answer this question. Is my family better off because I'm a member of that family than they would have been if I wasn't a member of that family? Is my employer, my workplace, my organization, better off because I'm part of that organization, that workplace, than they would have been if I wasn't? And is my community better off because I'm a citizen in that community than that community would have been if I wasn't a member of that community? If we could answer that question, that we're giving something back, not just taking something from our families and our communities and our professions, then in fact we can consider ourselves a success, and that becomes a very personal definition. So thank you for allowing me to clarify it, because I think our viewers and our participants, our treasure hunters out there, that's a question that always throws people off. But let me go back to the core question, back to that. When did you realize that you could help kids achieve their goals?
We just gotta put a little closure to the success thing. I just want to say one more thing. I never ever judge my success in working with kids based on their behavior. Every night I go to bed, when I go to bed, I play my day over my head, in my head, the way a lot of us do. To me, I'm successful if I behaved well, not them. If I use these strength-based strategies, if I greeted that kid with a big smile, if I did all of the things that I know a good strength-based person would do, and if I screwed up, I apologized, I know I'm successful. And I know I increase the odds that tomorrow, next year, this kid will have a better day. I tell parents, I tell professionals, when you work with kids, when you guide kids, it comes down to one word: probability. The better we do, the better they're gonna do. And the metaphor I came up with many years that I still cling to is the brick. A house needs a good foundation, a kid needs a good sense of self. I believe that a lot of the real at-risk kids we work with have poor foundations. They didn't get the love, the nurturance, and I'm not even blaming parents, because it could be wiring that they needed. And so they come to us lacking bricks. I believe, and will to the day I die, that every single time we respond instead of react to an at-risk kid, you keep your cool, you say please and thank you, you greet them with a smile, you lose a game on purpose to them, you reframe a negative behavior, you say something about their future, which we know is so critical. Every time you respond instead of react to a kid, you put a brick in. And that your job is simple. Despite all the complexity of this job, it's simple. We're bricklayers. Next fall, hopefully kids will come into school. Some of you teachers are going to get kids who should have had 3,000 bricks by now, but maybe come in with a couple of hundred. What is your job over the next 10 months? You're going to love them unconditionally. You're going to respond instead of react. You're going to do all this strength-based stuff that really transforms lives. So let's say a kid started with you with 380 bricks in September. If he or she leaves in June with 1,190, have you cured the kid? No, but what have you done? You've improved the odds dramatically that he or she will have a better life. To me, at the end of every day, when I play my day with my head, I always say to myself, did I do it right today? Did I respond? The answer is yes. I know I put bricks in. Bricks that will be with that kid the rest of their life. And I go to bed smiling, happy as could be. I get calls from kids I worked with 30, 40 years ago, and they thank me profusely for what me and my staff did. Really abused, acting out, tough kids. And they thank me profusely for what me and my staff did. Every time I get one of those calls or Facebook messages, I tear up a little. I look at my wife and I say, I guess we put a few more bricks in, I thought. And then you wouldn't change your job for any job in America. Bricklaying is a hard job when it's hot and humid. It's hard when it's freezing, but how does the bricklayer feel 6 months later when there's a beautiful house sitting on that foundation that he ached over, grunted over? Don't you think the bricklayer takes his or her family by and says, see that beautiful house? Wouldn't be there if it wasn't for me. And that's the metaphor that's kept me in it for my whole life. Okay, I've talked too much.
Well, but important words, important ideas to share. So I want to kind of circle back around because I think we did strike a chord with this word success because I think it has been ill-defined. We're trying to put a stronger foundational piece to it, laying our own bricks for better understanding so we all get on the same page. When we say the word success, what are we really talking about? And we know that there's the personal side, the organizational side, and then there's the cultural side. But what I heard you just say, Charlie, which I want to underscore and amplify, is that you judge your success on whether or not you being part of that young person's life was better than if you weren't part of that young person's life.
Absolutely.
And my goodness gracious, if you can answer that question, whether you're a teacher or an administrator or a probation officer, a detention officer, a child welfare worker, a social worker, that the community, the client, the student, the patient, the young person you're working with is better off because you are part of their life than they would have been if you were not part of their life. You have achieved a purposeful life, and that will energize you forevermore. And what I hear you saying is that you have this consistent energy force that allows you to reflect on what it is that you've tried to achieve in a young person's life, know that they're better off because you've been part of their life, and that fuels you for the next day. And we don't need that outside motivation. We use the internal motivation. So let me go on and take you to that next theme that I wanted to explore. And that is when you discovered strength-based strategies, where were you and how did that change your approach to working with young people rather than trying to fix their problems, understand their trauma alone, try to repair the risk that they experience in life, but actually begin a new focus on understanding what the child brings in terms of strengths and assets?
Well, it's interesting. For the first 15 to 20 years I work with at-risk kids in very tough settings, I didn't know I was using a strength-based approach. Never heard the term. I just knew intuitively and from what I was reading in literature and watching that there was a way of dealing with kids, but I didn't know it had a name. It's just really based on humanity. The golden rule: treat kids the way you want to be treated. It's very simple, with a lot of love and understanding. And I and my colleagues were very successful. And then about 15 years ago, I had already been doing trainings for about 10 years and still working with kids. I attended a keynote session before one of my workshops, and the lady, a well-known lady, gets in front of 500 people and says there's a new approach in the treatment community that's knocking the socks off outcomes. Physical restraints are way down, if not eliminated, in residential centers. Kids in our schools are learning a grade higher because of this approach. And then after about 5 minutes, she says it's called strength-based practice. And I had heard the term a few times. And then she goes on to define what it is. And everything she's talking about is everything I was taught from day one and have been using. And so I was so excited. I rushed home after doing my workshops, and I spent the weekend downloading every article I could on strength-based practice. And everything I'm reading, I'm going, hey, that explains why we set up the program this way. Hey, that's why we don't do this. That's why we say this. And that weekend literally changed my whole career, because it gave me the underpinning. It gave me the research. It validated everything I was doing. Early in my career, I would be talking about the same stuff, and people would come up to me, particularly adolescent programs, juvenile detention program. They say, you're too nice to the kids. They'll walk all over you. I says, no, I'm not. I believe in holding kids accountable, but this is what they need. And, but I couldn't back it up with research. Now the research is irrefutable. And if you want to help kids, you use a positive strength-based way. It literally is as much neurological as psychological. When you're positive using these strength-based approaches, literally the brain opens up. Kids start using pathways they never used before. It's almost impossible now to do anything else but this.
I think the exciting part of science is that science is dynamic. It challenges itself every single day. I mean, our work at ASU challenges every thought, every concept we had, dispelling myths that we may have carried on too long in our lives, and encouraging us to be very thoughtful and mindful of why some kids do well and other kids struggle. And when you continue to examine that question over time, you will find different answers. One of the answers we discovered long ago is this reward and punishment answer, this behavioral technique that if I reward kids, I may reward better behavior. If I punish kids, I may eliminate bad behavior. Charlie, talk to us about that concept that we have carried far too long in our toolkit to try to help kids with punishments and rewards. Talk to us a little bit about that.
It's an interesting discussion because it's not black and white. I think it's pretty clear that using extrinsic motivation like rewards and all that stuff, it's probably been overdone, no question, but it still has its place. When you have kids who have been severely traumatized, who are stuck, won't move at all, occasionally an incentive might make sense to get them to move a couple of baby steps. In the strength-based world, we say little changes ripple into dramatic solutions. So I think if you do strength-based practice right, which is really all about building great relationships, you don't need that extrinsic help the way we've been using it in the past. But I tell teachers now that don't dismiss it from your toolbox. I mean, one of the toughest kids I ever worked with was a 5th grader. He was kicked out of the school, was in a residential school. He had serious mental health issues, on multiple medications. They tried every therapeutic thing in the world to help this kid. Nothing worked. They put him back in 5th grade. He was on 6 medications. They put him back in his school. They took him out of a residential center that they were spending $100,000, put him back in his regular school, knowing he wasn't going to do any work. But they threw their hands up and they said, well, we'll just hire an aide and she can follow him around because he does no work, has serious mental illness. The greatest therapists in the world work with him. In November of that 5th grade, they asked me to work with him. And they told me the history. I drove over to the school. I found him in the library, and he was just wandering around. He looked like a zombie. His eyes were glassed over. He was on 6 medications. Again, hadn't picked up a book in 2 or 3 years. And so I went up to him. I says, I'm Charlie Appelstein. The kids call me Mr. A. I'm going to be working with you this year. He says, I'm Josh. My teacher has a gun. She's going to blow my brains out tonight. I go, Josh, what's your favorite restaurant? He says, I like McDonald's. She also has a knife, might slit my throat. I said, well, what do you like at McDonald's, Josh? He says, I like a Big Mac, shake and fries. I said, well, how do you like that? We're in the library. You know, find me any book, read me 1 sentence, and I'll drive 7 miles and get you a Big Mac, shake and fries at McDonald's. He looked at me kind of shocked, went over, bent down, found a 2nd grade book, and with his fingers shaking violently, he read me a sentence. It took him 5 minutes. I stopped everything. I drove to McDonald's, got him a Big Mac, shake and fries. By the end of the year, he was off all medications. He was singing in the choir and had friends. I think that was a great intervention. Oftentimes you need something, not oftentimes, sometimes when a kid is really stuck, often a traumatized kids, an incentive might get them to move a few baby steps. And like I said before, in the strength-based world, we say little changes ripple into dramatic solutions. But that said, I think the use of incentives is probably overdone. I would say in the last 5 years, when I get assigned kids or I consult at schools or treatment centers, I hardly recommend incentives the way I did 15, 20 years ago. If we do this really right, I don't think they should be the big tool that they were years ago. But let's not take them out of the toolbox. Sometimes I have a really tough kid. I take his picture, cut it into an oval, and tape it to a dollar bill so a kid earns Rick dollars. I've had people say a kid never did anything until you put their face on a dollar bill. I have some teachers, they stand on the desk and sing rap songs, you know, as a reward for a kid doing a little better. So I keep it there. I don't think there's all or nothing in this business. When you work with at-risk kids, you want to have the biggest toolbox you can. And so every now and then when I'm faced with a situation, I say, you know, I might pick out an incentive with this kid or group. But I would say most of the time I don't.
So Charlie, talk to us a little bit about punishment and what that word means and what are the consequences of punishment and whether or not it has any value in terms of helping to shape a young person's behavior.
Well, you know, that's the easiest question you've asked me yet. We should never punish a kid. Let's define that. A punishment isn't related to what a kid did. A consequence is. Consequences should always be used when it comes to discipline. Consequences reinforce values. Punishment has nothing to do with values. Punishment is all about inflicting pain as a deterrent. You know, I love elementary school teachers. That's where I spend so much of my time consulting. They are my heroes. Sadly, though, a lot of not a lot, but too many elementary school teachers, they punish the kids every day. What do? They take recess away. What does that have to do with anything? Kids acting out at 9 o'clock and they miss recess? You know, Rick, if you were driving home from this meeting today, well, you're probably at your home. If you were driving to the grocery store, you probably shouldn't do that. So let's just say sometime in the future you get into your car and you're driving and you get pulled over for speeding. And the cop comes up to you and says, "Excuse me, Mr. Miller, you were speeding. What's your favorite TV show?" "What? What's your favorite TV show?" Law and Order. You know, you're butt kissing the guy. "Well, you can't watch it for 2 years." "What? Give me the freaking ticket. That's 4 years. So you'd go ballistic. Yet you go home, your kid's acting up. Give me the Game Boy. Gordon, who wrote Parent Effectiveness Training in the 70s, he says something very brilliant. He says a parent should never say or do anything to a kid that distances themselves. And I think the same is for teachers and professionals. You never want to say or do anything to a kid that when you punish, you're inflicting pain as a deterrent. With a higher functioning kid, that may work because you're not doing it very often. But if you had a foster kid you're working with every day and you start punishing this kid all the time, he's out of your class, he's out of your program. There isn't a behavior you can't come up with that we can't come up with a logical, something that's related, that reinforces values. You know, if you have and why are consequences important? Because they reinforce values. Every setting that deals with kids should have values around safety, respect. So if a kid is really being disrespectful, there can be a consequence because the message is you're going against our value here. But the consequence has to be, hey, could you please chill out for a few minutes? You made some tough decisions with your language. I don't care. I hate your We'll talk a little while. But sadly, I walk through high school sometimes and I hear a vice principal lambasting a kid. "Hey, you don't talk to your teachers that way." How many times did I tell you that's not language? What are you doing? You're reinforcing a value by going against it? No. We use consequences. They are related. They reinforce values. But again, if you do this right, if you build great relationships, you set less limits. You know?
Yep.
You know,
And I think
the best way to deal with behavior is to prevent it.
Yeah, and absolutely. And what attracted Charlie and I and the collective work that we do and the work that our center is now doing and Charlie continues to do through his company is that although we may use different terminology, we're validating a lot of what you all have already done intuitively, also through your own trainings. So we just want to, part of what we're doing with these Hope Forums and our trainings is to remind people that if you're doing these things, congratulations, you're doing them right. If you're not doing these things, this gives you an opportunity. If you're not helping every child succeed, no exceptions, it's giving you more tools in your toolkit to find ways to help every child succeed because you want to be that person that can answer that question for yourself. Is that young person better off because I'm part of their life, than they would have been if I wasn't part of their life? And how do I become a better part of their life? And one of the conversations Charlie and I talked about before the Hope Forum went live was that comes with training. That comes with professional development. That comes with additional knowledge and not giving up on yourself. Usually when we give up on a kid, it's because we've given up on ourselves first. And usually when we give up on ourselves, it's because we've run out of options. I don't know what else to do. I've tried everything. And let me say, there's lots more you can do, and you actually haven't tried everything. And that's why professional development and training, these forums, the webinars, whatever we're doing to trying to keep our brains fresh and engaged is important. And I congratulate you for doing that. Charlie, I'm going to go to some Q&A here in a second, because I know we have almost 700 people who have joined us today. That's remarkable. That's a huge forum. I've attended some worldwide forums with 100 people, 150 people, 200 people, and that seems large, but we're almost at 700. So there's a
Can I say one thing before we go?
Well, we're not going. There's a need for what we're doing. We're going to go to Q&A.
Okay.
Okay, and I think you'll have other chances, because I know I've been with Charlie over 2-3 days. His content is rich. It's dynamic. So he's going to have these things he needs to say and share. But we have other opportunities where we'll talk later about how we're going to engage Charlie.
I get you.
So Kim, we're going to toss it to you and open up the forum for Q&A from those who are watching us.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Great. So Charlie, Robert wants to know, what advice or tools or strategies do you have for teaching students with social/emotional behaviors in juvenile detention facilities?
Well, again, let's remember, treatment of all kids starts with the premise that the first mandate for all of us is to build great relationships with those kids. Almost all the research on school discipline says the same thing. If you want kids to behave better, build great relationships. So before we get into, the specific answers, let's remember, for all of these questions, in terms of all the behaviors that you could bring up, it all starts with relationship building. I tell people, from the moment you walk into a kid's life, or the moment a day starts to the moment the kid leaves you, they should have multiple opportunities for success. That often means you're creating things for them to be successful, you're modifying, you're trumpeting existing strengths, and that often helps you connect so strongly with kids, because they see you and they say, there's someone who feels good. And so the bottom line, the foundation for all of our work, despite wherever you're working, is building that great relationship, greeting that kid with a big smile, focusing on what they're doing right, put them in a position to succeed. The first time you see that kid you're talking about something he did good yesterday, the game he beat you in, and that literally puts chemicals in the brain. And then the next part is to look at the kids that you're talking about, kids with social, emotional, and a lot of those kids need really help on expressing themselves. There's a wonderful program out there called Zones of Regulation, that kids who really need help verbalizing and expressing what they're feeling and being in check with their bodies and stuff, they have a wonderful program for having kids check their body, coming up with coping skills, teaching them to verbalize what's inside and so forth. So once you start with the foundation of great relationship, then you look at the specific kids you're working with, kids on the spectrum, kids who are really inflexible, kids with social emotional, and what do they need? And a lot of what the experts will say is those kids need skills. And, the zones of regulation, and a lot of those kids are also helped by the way we're teaching them to do mindfulness now, relaxation, all that kind of stuff. So the answer is to start with the foundation of great relationship. It all starts there. You don't start with this is one of my pet peeves. So many people make a big deal about skill building, and kids should learn skills, but not before the relationship is there. So we start with the relationship first, and then we look at the specific things the kids need in terms of a social emotional growth. And a lot
Charlie,
of that is how to express themselves.
Yeah, one of our profound research conclusions was it wasn't curriculum or programs that made the greatest difference in kids' lives. It was adult relationships. And we will go one step before that. We'll say you can't create a relationship unless that's authentic and genuine with the kid. And that can't happen unless we go back to that early question. Do you believe that you can help every child become successful personally, organizationally, or culturally? So we have that clarified. So that belief in that kid, that you know you can help make a difference in that kid, you believe in that kid, you believe that kid's going to achieve something in their life, be a contributing member of society, however you convey that, and you have to convey that directly, not indirectly. The kid should know I care for him. Let them know you care for them. Articulate that. So that's creating the belief. The belief turns into a relationship. Charlie just underscored that. And then that relationship turns into skill building, right?
Exactly.
So you have 2 steps before you can actually begin to offer. And we try to get into the social emotional learning side of it before we create the relationship side of it. And before we create the relationship side of it, we forget to create the belief side of it. So there's these protocols that we know actually work. Kim probably has a ton of questions, Charlie, so we're going to toss it back to Kim and see where we go from here. But that's a wonderful, wonderful question. Don't forget, don't get into the skills side of it before you get into the relationship side, and then deal with your own beliefs in that kid, because you want to come across genuine and authentic. Oh, I'll say something later, but I want Kim to ask. Another thought just entered my mind. So
I have millions of things I'm holding back.
Me too. We'll go for 4 hours, but we'll talk about how we're going to do that later, Charlie.
Yeah.
Kim?
Okay, so Jillian is asking both of you, she says, how do you combat, but I'll change it to how do you work with colleagues that do not believe all children can succeed?
Charlie, you want me to start that one?
Sure.
And then toss it to you? So
Sure.
that really is the recurring question when we're trying to change a culture in a school or organization or community. We have people who we know are the believers. They want to go in this direction. They know they can help every child succeed. They know there's no such thing as a bad kid. They know it, and then they have this other group of people who become the naysayers. Oh, we've tried this before. This doesn't work. We're just wasting our time. Some kids do well, some kids don't do well. Just face the reality. The best answer for that, and this is after 50 years of wrestling with that question, the best answer for that is tell those naysayers you love them, and then go on to making a difference in kids' lives. Don't default to them. Don't spend any time trying to convince them differently. Just say, we're going to create a culture in the school, organization, or community that truly believes all kids can succeed. We're going to create relationships with every kid in a meaningful way, as Charlie just outlined. And then, as you know, if you've been through Kids Hope training, we're going to teach them how to time travel, which is our synonym for hope. We're going to teach them how to envision their future, establish their goals, come up with strategies for those goals, and then learn how to put gas in your own gas tank. Come to this simple conclusion. I don't tolerate anyone who gives up on kids. I don't give up on kids, nor do I tolerate anyone who gives up on kids. That should be the mantra in every school and organization. I don't give up on kids, nor do I tolerate anyone that gives up on kids. That's difficult, but it's important. Charlie, how do you deal with the naysayers?
I wish I had a nickel for every time I heard that question. My response, I don't think we should label kids. We talked about it earlier. I don't think we should label teachers as resistant or unbending, unyielding, and so forth, because once you label a teacher as resistant, that's what we talked about before. You kind of throw the thing away. That teacher who's resistant, who won't try these strategies, she probably would love to try them, but she's insecure. She's set in her ways. Her self-esteem is based on the way she's done it. Because remember, when you introduce change into a school system, the message you're sending the more experienced teachers is what you were doing wasn't that great. Here's a better way. And that's why anytime I try to change a teacher or a school, we got to talk to the whole staff about what change is all about and how to accept it. That's why, I have issues with some of these systemic school programs, because I heard one of the head guys of one of these programs, and I won't name it, during a 3-day training said, I'm not a process guy. And he lost me right there. If you're going to try and change teachers, change a whole school, which I've been doing my whole life, you got to sit with those, help them understand what changes life. I tell teachers, you know, my cousin was a drug counselor. He said sometimes they would help one of, a spouse to give up drugs or give up drinking, and the other spouse would get them to get back drinking because the other spouse would say, well, at least I knew where he was on Friday night. Life was predictable. So change is hard even when it's good. So one, if you want to change people, understand there's a process. You got to tell them, you know, the stuff I'm giving you, by the way, it's not about good versus bad. You're a really good teacher. This is about you being better. And then you use strength-based principles. What did I say before? One of the greatest strength-based principles is little changes can ripple into dramatic solutions. So I have a teacher, and I've had thousands over the years who are very stuck in their ways. I try them to do a little thing, get them to do one thing, and then I get really excited about it. You know, what you want to do with the whole culture is you do this stuff boldly and excitedly, but never put other people down. But then drop the hand out in the middle. Put a sign on the wall. The harder I try, the higher I fly. Put a picture of a brick. Let people see what you're doing. Get excited about it, and then look for little changes. And then sit with these people. If you see that teacher doing that one thing better, like for instance, my #1 feedback is please and thank you. You know, I could do 16 hours of training. I'm going to think, hey, Charlie, ever since I started saying please and thank you to the kids, every time I make a request, my whole group has changed. Why is please and thank you so important? Listen, hey, Rick, could you please let me talk a little more? Thanks. Rick, let me talk more. You know, one engages, one puts off. And these are some of these strategies. So if I see a teacher who heard that, starts to say a little more please and thank you, is a little more supportive to the kids, hey, I'm patting on the, hey, I love that. Because here's the beautiful thing. Again, I think all these teachers want to be strength-based, want to be positive, but they're scared, they're nervous, they're insecure. But once they start doing it, and I've been seeing this for 30, 40 years, it takes over. They build greater relationships. They feel better.
Charlie,
and it's like this rolling ball, you know. I've seen whole schools change.
Yeah, I
little
hear,
by little.
I hear in that tone and thought that it's almost as that young kid that you described earlier who says, I really like acting out. I really like getting in trouble. I really like doing poorly in school. I really like, you know, all those negative things, and saying, no, that's not what these kids are saying. They would rather be like that kid who has lots of friends, who's doing well, who has a future. That's what they want. They just don't know how to get there, and that's why they need us as their navigators to help them get from point A to point B.
And that rigid teacher would rather be the positive.
There you go. There you go. It holds true. It's part of the human condition that we're looking at, that dynamic teacher, that inspiring teacher, the teacher who's greeted by their students and can't wait to get into class because they know that teacher loves them. We all want to be that teacher, or we all want to be that PO, or we all want to be that DO, we all want to be that MSW or that social worker. It's how you get there, and we know the formula. We know. Yeah. But your other point's well taken. Even good change is hard. So you have to be intentional about what you see yourself being in the future, and then doing everything you can to get there and be that person that you know is there, and create the school so it's not just about me, it's equally about we, because I can only help so many kids succeed, but we collectively can help all children succeed without exceptions.
And be patient. Some teachers take a while.
Yeah.
I had a teacher the third year I did a training at a school. He is totally against all my stuff. The beginning of my third training, the third year, he comes up, he says, hey, Charlie, I greeted the kids with a big smile today. I did some of the stuff you're talking about. They start freaking out. What's wrong, Mr. Roberts? Why are you being so nice? He says, I'm learning something new. You know, 3 years it took him to get to that point. That's part of it.
I have to interject a story here because I think it plays well to what we're talking about. So I visited a juvenile detention center a while back, and I was doing a presentation for them, and they were marching the young people in from their pods. And it's a very regimented strategy. You have to walk straight, you're wearing slippers, you're wearing pajama pants, your hands are behind your back, your eyes are forward. There's no change in that behavior. And the detention officers are on both sides of that pathway. So I'm watching all the young people walk in, stern faces on them, looking forward, no interaction, hands behind their backs, pajamas, the whole bit, walking forward. And I noticed that every detention officer's face was stern because this is serious stuff, moving kids from one location to the other. So I understand the safety part of it. But there was one detention officer that as the kids walked past her, she smiled at them. When they walked past her, she smiled at them. What's more human in a dehumanizing world than a smile? And when she smiled at them, I noticed every kid smiled back. And it was just this remarkable condition. And it dawned on me that these kids at that instant felt safe. They felt physically safe because they were in a condition which they weren't going to be harmed by anything. But equal to being physically safe, which is well done in detention facilities, they felt emotionally safe. And that came via a smile. It's understanding those nuances in the human relationship that becomes profound.
I tell teachers, you got to be a great actor. I don't care what kind of mood you're in. The second those kids walk into your room, you got to, I can't wait to see you, I love, because they need that. They need that. They're running out of time.
Yeah, we asked the question, where's the happiest place on earth? And if you answer Disneyland or Disney World, you're wrong. The happiest place on earth should at that time be your school, be the organization, even be the detention facility. Why? Because you're physically, emotionally, and intellectually safe. And what Disney realized about the happiest place on earth, which we'll say, where's the most hopeful place on earth? The answer should be your organization. And why is the most hopeful place on earth? Because the people who work there are hopeful people. Because you can't have a kid at hope until you first have an adult at hope. Why is Disneyland the happiest place on earth? Because Disney promoted that we hire happy people. That's why, to your point, Charlie, you're guaranteed that if you go to Disneyland or Disney World, Mickey Mouse is not going to have a bad day.
Absolutely.
If we can expect that from a mouse, we can expect that from a teacher, a probation officer, a social worker, a youth worker, because that's the role we play in kids' lives. We give them our best each day, and that becomes powerful. So being a good actor on those days, I'm sure Mickey Mouse isn't having a good day every day, but boy, when you show up at Disneyland, he better be having a good day, because you don't want to go to Disneyland when Mickey Mouse is having a bad day. It's not a good.
Well, I tell people, if you are wheeled in for open heart surgery tomorrow, and the surgeon comes up to you and says, "Excuse me, Mr. Miller, I got to tell you, I'm kind of in a bad mood today. Things haven't been going good, but I can still cut your heart open." I don't think you're going to say cut, doctor. It is critical. Yeah. You got to turn it on when these kids come in. You got to turn it on at certain times of the day, because that says to every kid that there's someone out there that can't wait to see me, that literally releases chemicals in the brain. This faint-based stuff we're talking about, it's as much neurological as it is physiological.
That's right. And it's for you too. You cannot have a kid at home until you have an adult at home.
Absolutely.
So we can make those good choices for ourselves. We can choose to be hopeful each day, or we can choose to be hopeless. That's the free will that we actually have as human beings. We want all this liberty, and that's important. But one of the pieces that come with that is knowing you have choices. You could either choose to be hopeless, and one way you can choose to be hopeless is to stop going to professional development. Don't believe there's anything else to learn. And the secret to becoming hopeless or hopeful is hang around with hopeless people. You will pick up their behavioral traits. If you choose to be hopeful, guess what you should do? Hang out with hopeful people. You will pick up their behavior traits, and those both become choices. Kim, I'm sure there's a ton more questions out there.
I know, and you guys give such short, concise answers.
Sorry.
No, everybody's loving it. I had a few people ask about consequences versus punishment. If you could elaborate on that a little bit more, Charlie.
Again, a consequence is related to what a kid did. A punishment isn't. What are some of my favorite consequences that I've been using for 40 years with my own kid and kids in detention centers elementary schools, preschool, take a break. I don't like the term timeout. I think it's stigmatizing. I don't like timeout chairs. I tell kids, look, if we all make mistakes. If I'm in a bad mood and I say something wrong, the principal might say, Charlie, take a walk. Come. That's all it is. I remember explaining this to a group of fourth graders in September. They were supposed to be real hellions because they were so horrid in third grade. And I got in front of them the first day of school and we talked about discipline. I said, look, if you make a mistake, we all make mistakes. You're all great kids. Teacher might say, take a break. Go where you want to go. Just chill out. Think about what's going on. Come back when you're ready. I remember saying that, and a little girl who had really been tough the year before, she raised her hand. Why? I go, what? She says, wow, last year timeout meant you were bad. This year it's not such a big deal. I said, right, NBD, no big deal. And they had a beautiful year. So take a break, open-ended. You could do different kinds of breaks, but that's a very natural thing. Could you please take a break? Redoing, kids said something fresh to you. Hey, can you try that again? I think you called me teacher of the year. Not sure it came out that way, called you freaking idiot. So they rush into a room. So kids can be asked to do something before you move on. Proximity manipulation. Kid is acting out. They've been warned a couple times. You try to, distract them. It's still a problem. Now they have to be moved closer to you. What's the logical consequence for acting out? You got to be moved closer. Reparation. It's like restorative justice. Kid acts out. An older kid, maybe you say, based on the choices you're making, you've taken away a lot of the good feelings we have in the setting right now. I'd like you to give something back. Then come up with a chore or something the kid can do.
You balance that out with, and I've heard you talk about this, you balance that out in terms of power plays. A punishment is really a power play over kids, right?
Yes, it's a misuse of power. It's about taking something away. It's about aversion, and what it does is it separates. It separates. A high-functioning kid will respond okay to punishment if it's now and then. Only if it's now and then. But if you got a kid who's acting out a lot, he's always being punished, he ends up worse. I've had foster parents email me and call me for years saying, I took everything away from the kid. What should I do now? Put everything back and come in and we'll talk about consequences. Because when you're really stressed, what do you want to do? You want a quick response, and often that's punishment. What do parents do? They spank the kid. They take something away, and it just makes things worse. But don't be guilty out there if you've punished your kids over the years. If you love your kids and you've punished them now and then, big deal. They'll still probably grow up fine. Because mostly what you did was great. I just think your kids would be even better if you used consequences that were related to what the kid did.
Yeah. And boy, that is a whole workshop in itself, powerful. But we're going to talk about that. We have time, Kim, for one last question, and then I want to kind of wrap this up and let people kind of get on with the other parts of their life, and thank them from the bottom of our heart for joining us today and seeing the energy and passion and experience.
Thank you for coming.
Wit and wisdom that Charlie Appelstein offers. Kim?
Yep, and let me just mention, a lot of people are asking, yes, this is being recorded, and if you registered, whether you attended or not, you will receive the recording, and they're all being posted to our YouTube channel as well, so you can find past recordings on there. A couple people have also asked about, we're being the caring adults for these kids while they're in our care, in our classrooms, in our facilities, but then they go home to horrible home environments. How do we help them with that?
Well, the opportunity to know that there's at least somebody somewhere somehow. We will say we don't control the risk or trauma that kids experience. It's tough for us to do that, but what we do control is we control the hope. And that hope can be that independent variable that makes all the difference in the world, that gives them the resiliency and the strength necessary to overcome the difficulties they experience at home or other places. It's the absence of any of that hope. So as long as you're providing some level of hope, you're providing some level of resiliency, some level of energy, some level of courage in young people. It's the absence of that. Charlie, great question, isn't it?
It is, and just a couple quick things. One, remember, we should be reaching out to the parents. Let's not label them. You use every strength-based strategy that I could give you that's out there with them. They're good people too. They don't like hurting their kids. They don't like yelling at their kids. They would rather be the better parents, so reach out to them. And then the other thing too is, remember, you got to do what's best possible. I really believe that when I'm working with kids in the schools or residential centers, if I could, really give them this wonderful strength-based stuff and put a lot of bricks in, they're going to have those bricks the rest of their life, regardless of what's going on afterwards. But I can't stress to you enough how important it is to reach out to the parents. One of the most difficult parents I've had to work with, she was really yelling at her kids, yelling at everybody. She was really out of control almost. I went over and did a home visit with her the very first time. She invites me into her house. I sit down and I said, look, Mrs. G, before we get going, I got to tell you something before I forget. I think your daughter has the best values, the best morals of any kinder program. She really knows right from wrong, and I think she must have got that from you. And I just want to say that before we get going. Now, this is the most difficult parent. My therapist, I was the director of the program, they wouldn't even go over. She was so scary. I will never forget as long as I live. It taught me so much. She started sobbing uncontrollably. I said, what's the matter, dear? Why are you crying? She says, the first time in 13 years, someone has said something nice about my parenting. And that was the beginning of this woman turning the corner, becoming a really wonderful parent. So let's not write off teachers who are rigid. Let's not write off parents who could be better. Let's believe everybody in this world is a good person. And with the right help and support, we can change those people.
Great. So I want to thank Charlie Appelstein for spending a powerful, poignant hour with us. His insights are extremely important. I thank you, Charlie, for giving me a few moments to sneak in a thought here and there.
I hope I didn't talk too much, Rick.
You did remarkably well. And then I should let people know that Charlie and I and our center at ASU are going to team up for a 3-hour workshop with more detail on the themes and concepts we explored today. We're going to do that on May 21st. Each of you will be receiving an invitation. There is a small registration fee to kind of keep us alive during this period of time, but no one is ever denied the opportunity of attending our workshop because of a budget constraint. So if there is that, let us know. If you can pay the small registration fee, it helps us advance our work. That's important, particularly as we're all experiencing a difficult
I'm also
time.
working on a wonderful 50-page handout that every attendee will get. And no copyright issues. They could use it forever.
And both Charlie and I are in agreement that we'll each send you an 8x10 glossy of ourselves. So if you get bored, you could actually look at our pictures at some time. So thank you, each and every one of you. We had almost 700 people participate in this webinar. I think we were at 694. We had 900 plus registered, the largest we've had so far. Next week, we're going to have Dr. Faye Mandel, a psychologist who has created what she calls the self-powerment model. It goes beyond empowerment to self-powerment, and you'll just love the way she introduces that. And then the week after, we have Dr. Valerie Calderon from the Gallup poll, who's been studying hope for the past 10 years. So we know she has some remarkable insights to share with us. So stick with us in our subsequent hope forums, and we'll see you next week, and we'll talk to you more about some of the workshops we'll be offering in the weeks to come. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Kim, and God bless to all of you.
Keep doing what you're doing. We're all in this together.
Bye-bye. Take care.